Hello and welcome to another edition of Fermanagh GAA TV. Tonight we're coming from the excellent surroundings of the Holyrood Hotel here in Bundoran, County Donegal. And with me on the show tonight is young Gale's corner forward here to my right hand side, Thomas McCaffrey, who has just been called up to the Pauric McGurn Fermanagh squad for 2015. Also on me tonight here on the show on the right hand side is well-known GAA legend Brian McEniff, who has done so much for the GAA. I actually googled your name today, Brian, if you don't mind, and I just spotted what I already knew. You were the first man to manage Donegal to an All-Ireland title back in 1982. You managed Ulster 12 Railway Cups, you won an All-Star in 72, and you also won 2 Ulster Championship medals, which isn't bad going for Thomas, for who's a young man like yourself starting in the GAA. If you won half that, you'd be happy. Starting off with yourself, Thomas, as well. You won the McCrory Cup for St Michael's Enniskillen back in 2012, and now you've been called up to Pauric McGurn's squad. What's it been like so far in the early couple of weeks?
Well, it's always an honour to be part of the Fermanagh squad. It's always good to put on the county jersey, but we haven't really started. We've just met a couple of times so far, because of the training ban or whatever, so we've only kind of had a couple of meetings, and we're only starting in the strength and conditioning at the minute, so it's hard to judge so far, but hopefully we can get up and running now in a couple of weeks.
Yeah, we've seen over the last couple of weeks the likes of John Woods, Paul Ward, Mark Murphy stepping away from the county football. Woods in particular, hopefully he'll come back soon. But the likes of yourself, Timor's Owen McManus, your own club mate Rory McGallagher of Eunan Gales, you are probably the future of the county side. Yeah,
over the last 2 or 3 years, Fermanagh have had a high turnover of players. Them all retiring. It's kind of probably hard with Fermanagh, with such a low population. The younger players can hopefully step up to the plate with such all the older players retiring.
Yeah, I understand. Brian, over to yourself. I see this year you managed Bundoran in the Donegal Senior Football Championship. Maybe the less said about there, the better. And next week you've this game. You're helping out Armagh's Joe Kiernan with the Ulster team game for Anto against Dublin. Where did all that there come from?
Well, actually, I stepped in because Jim McGuinness was unavailable. That's the only reason I was there, and I'm only a filler, to be honest with you. Joe's the manager, and I was glad to be asked, let's be fair about it, because one way or another I was going to go up for the game for Anto because I have a friendship with the Gales in Antrim, and I think it's a great cause that he's bringing this game forward. And it's unique in the fact that it's going to Ravenhill, which is now called Kingspan Park, which is strange for Breffni being in Kingspan Park as well. But the whole lot appealed to me, and actually it was Paddy McGreevy, that phoned me looking for Jim's number, and then he came back to me and asked me would I involve myself. So I went up to the press lunch, and the rest is history. As of at the minute, I've heard nothing. So I'm sure Joe's in the process of assembling an Ulster team, I hope anyway. I think I'll be just the bagman, ballman, and just to clarify the Bundoran situation, I wasn't at the Bundoran first senior championship match. I was there for the other two, unfortunately, because the young team manager from Ballyshannon left because the boys weren't putting it in. They're too fond of a social life around this town, unfortunately. But be that as it may, they're a good young football side until such time as they settle down and concentrate on playing football instead of socialising. They're not going to get the success they should deserve, and you only get out of it what you put into it. They're playing good first halves, and after that they're capitulating.
Right. Thanks for that. Thomas, back to yourself. You scored an astonishing 4-1 in just 2 games this year for Eunan Gales in the Fermanagh Senior Football Championship. Eunan Gales has picked up a championship quarter-final defeat to neighbours Devonish, and he's finished 7th place in the Fermanagh Senior Football League Division 1, which does make his return back to the Senior Championship next season. Would you class Eunan Gales' season as a success or a failure?
Well, when you put it like that, it's probably a failure, but at the moment, when it actually happened, we were kind of dragged into the relegation battle, so when we got the 7th place, we were kind of happy because the Fermanagh County Board, the way they were rescheduling the whole league structure, so we just about made it in. So we were happy just to not be relegated and to make it into the championship for the following year. Now, the quarter-final defeat to Garrison, it's a big rivalry between us, and we were always kind of gearing ourselves towards that game, but we were disappointed we lost, and we narrowly lost out, I suppose. But we've a young team, I suppose it's kind of like Fermanagh, we don't have too many older players now at this stage, but so we've a young squad, and hopefully we can push on the next couple of years and maybe win something.
Yeah, you certainly do have the young squad. When you think of the players like the Lyonses, the McCanns, including yourself, it must be an average age of very young anyway.
Yeah, you know, I suppose we had a good underage system, and you know we've good under 16 team, minor team coming up as well. You know, so maybe in a lot of years' time, them boys can step up as well, and we'll have a very solid senior team in a lot of years' time.
Thanks for that, Brian. I suppose I couldn't let you come on the show tonight without asking you about our own Rory Gallagher, who's now taken over at Donegal. It's a big step for Rory, following Jim McGuinness.
Well, I think Rory's well fit for the job, and that's why he was elected top of the poll. There's no doubt about that. You know, there was some reservations about a man coming in from Fermanagh to manage Donegal, but that was only some small-minded people. But by and large, we're very happy to have Rory there. He was a very talented footballer. I was actually in Clones one day against Man, and I think it was 3-9 he scored. Yeah. It was an outstanding performance, and then he's won All Ireland club championship with St Gall's. But he learned under Jim McGuinness, let's be fair about it. They went in at under 21 level, and then they came out and he went on to win All Ireland. And then there was some difference arose. I don't know who was right and who was wrong. I didn't get into what it was, but that didn't take from Rory's prominence. But he was involved in Kilcar over the last couple of years, so he's a good feel for Donegal football, and I think he'll do a very good job. He's a good squad of players as well.
He certainly does. And I suppose, as you see over there in the soccer world, in the FA Cup and the Premier Leagues of England, of course, then Fermanagh have to be thrown up again Donegal in the McKenna Cup for early 2015 with Derry and Queens. That should give Rory Gallagher an early baptism against his home county.
Well, it's difficult, I suppose, playing against your home county, but I was just relating to you before we came on television here that my last year there in 05, I went out and scoured the county to see if I could find 4 players. Now, I've found 4 players that are still in Jim's, or like Rory's squad, and I think Rory should take a look at that. And I played an entirely new squad in the McKenna Cup, and I think that's what Donegal should be doing. Like Fermanagh going in with a relatively new squad as well. So if I were him, I would be putting in a whole new squad of players and concentrating on the National League as distinct from the McKenna Cup, and see can he blood some of these players and see if they can step up to the plate. And if he can get 3 or 4 new players to freshen up the squad, isn't that a great bonus for him? But that's me talking. Rory can make up his own mind. I suppose he might want to win the McKenna Cup.
I suppose on a special note, Rory, will wish you the very best of luck with Donegal, and hopefully you can learn from bits and pieces and maybe come to Fermanagh someday. Thomas, I suppose moving on to the big game this weekend, Roslea and St Eunan's Letterkenny. You've faced Roslea twice this year in the league, and you've actually beat them way back in May time in the league, quite comfortably if I remember. They really are the benchmark for all club teams in Fermanagh at the moment.
Yeah, you know, when we played them back up in May time, you know, they probably didn't have a full squad out at the time, and you know, we played particularly well that day. Then we played them, I think it was probably about June, July time then, in the league, and we just lost them. So we were there or thereabouts, but the difference, you know, Roslea can step it up. They're a different animal in the big games, you know, and kind of showed that this year. You know, they won the double in the juniors and the seniors, so they're kind of a credit of a club, and fair play to the club and the players involved. And Fermanagh clubs are kind of playing catch up at the minute with Roslea, because you know they're really setting the standard for us, and we're just kind of playing catch up at the minute.
And you probably know, you know, some of them younger Roslea players who really are impressing, like James McMahon, Niall Cosgrove. Would you know them players? Are they going to maybe come out to the county team in the future?
You know, all the talk's probably about the 2 Quigleys, but you know, everybody forgets about the quality of players Roslea have out the field. You know, they have really good players like James himself. I think he's supposed to be up onto the Fermanagh panel after Roslea, if they get any further, then hopefully get better than St Eunan's Letterkenny. But you know, we'll see. Hopefully.
Brian, I'm sure you probably know plenty about St Eunan's Letterkenny. They're going into the game this Sunday as huge 2-9 favourites in the bookmakers, and they also have home advantage, which is a huge help. Would you give Roslea any chance at all on Sunday?
Well, I was very impressed with Roslea last year. I was in I think it was Oma last year when they played Leinster or county champions, and they gave them plenty of football that particular day. So don't forget you have the Seamus and Sean Quigley, and then you have the younger brother playing at the back, Connor. But you also have Peter and James Sherry, and like I always rated James Sherry as a great player. You know, I would have him in the periphery of an Ulster squad going back, and then that young Niall Cosgrove, I see him as a great player for the future. I think he's great potentiality. But there has that tradition in Roslea for a small area. Like Letterkenny would have a catchment area of maybe 15,000 people. which is nearly as much as all of Fermanagh might have to pick from when you boil down the population. So they have a great opportunity now, and seeing that they've quite a young squad that's physically very strong, because Maxie Corn, who was involved with Jim McGuinness as well and has managed the county under 21 team for the last 2 years, has done a lot of strength and conditioning, so they're big and strong. And I saw Murphy there at the beginning of the second half last Sunday trying to run through them, and 2 of them stood up to him, and they took the weight out of Big Murphy, because he actually faded out of the game for a good 15 or 20 minutes because it was a heavy tackle. He went in there, and then late in the game when they were trying to get aerial ball in on top of him, they crowded him out. So they're a good strong side, young side, but a good bit of tradition. And ironically, the man of the match was John Harn at 38 years of age. He gave an outstanding display. He was all over the pitch, back, forward, I couldn't believe it. And of course the Rory Gallagher, a man of vast experience. And another lad that's been in the county Donegal squads for the last 12 years is Kevin Rafferty. Now he shipped a knock last Sunday, and I think he may not be available. And of course your former Fermanagh team manager is a very good son there, Darragh Mulgrew, a utility player that can mark a man or else play as a forward. And they've Conor Gibbons. You know, they've a lot of good players in Letterkenny, but they have the population base. Let's be fair about it. That's a big help to them. Like they're in the reserve final as well. So it's about numbers, as you mentioned earlier, that we have in Donegal, and that's a big advantage. We have a population of 150,000 people. So when I say go out and look for players, it's not that difficult to find players in Donegal, but it's given the time and the resources and the amount of league fixtures. Like we're still waiting for a playoff with St Michael's. We're sitting at the number 2 in Division 2. Michael's are number 2, second from the bottom in Division 1. So we have a playoff game coming up, and we're still playing football at this stage of the year in Donegal.
Yeah, and going back to the Ulster club, you see teams like Crossmaglen, Ballinderry, St Gall's all now out of the competition. Sure, it's a huge chance for Roslea or St Eunan's to maybe make a final, because you know Omagh, there's going to be pressure on them to win in the semi-final against Sunderland.
I see they're listed as champions, and you know, ironically, I'm not a gambling man at all, but last Sunday when I saw the odds on Omagh, I said to myself, and my mother's from outside Omagh, from the village of Carrickmore, which is a great GAA country. I'm not a gambling man, as I said. I was going to go out and put 10 euros on them at 6-1. I had that sneaking feeling that when you want to catch crosses in the first round, and the reason being is they've so dominated Armagh, they're coming out without a really competitive game. And that's really no more than Donegal catching Dublin. Dublin, no real competitive game going into that All-Ireland semi-final. And I fancied Omagh as outsiders to win that game. And it's good to see new teams, let's be fair about it. It's nice to see Slaughtneil coming out of Derry, and Roslea coming out for a second year out of Fermanagh there, and St Eunan's coming out of Donegal. It's nice to see new teams. We're fed up looking at Cross and the Galls and those players, certainly, and Ballinderry. It's nice to see new clubs come out in the competition, and there's going to be a new winner this year, and probably 2 new finalists, which is great for the competition.
And just on Sunday's game, I'll have to ask you to call it. Roslea are 3-1. Would you be going with any 10 euros on them on Sunday?
It'd be worth a gamble. Like I was talking to a sports journalist today, and they were suggesting a score that Roslea could score something like 4-6. But if you score for 4-6, you know, you won't be easy bet. Like they have the capacity to score goals. I like the Quigley brothers. I have to say I like good players, and they're 2 good players. I know sometimes they can be difficult to manage. Let's be fair. But I love good players. And Roslea have a tradition. It's not today or yesterday, the Ulster club final, but Peter McGinnity going back many years ago. So they have the tradition in Roslea, and there's no reason why they should fear Letterkenny. But on the face of it, you have to go for Letterkenny, but home advantage.
Thanks for that. Thomas, over to yourself. I know Sean's a big doubt for Sunday. Sean Quigley, that is. Can you see Roslea maybe shocking Letterkenny on Sunday?
Well, I wouldn't have probably the vast knowledge over St Eunan's Letterkenny as Brian does. But you know, I was at 2 championship games. I was at Bundoran and Glenswell, and I was at Kilkear and St Michael's. And probably, not to be harsh, but they were probably the 2 worst games that I've ever seen. Jim McGuinness has probably changed the way the clubs play in Donegal. They were seriously defensive, and I think the half-time score in the Kilkear St Michael's game was 4 points to no score, and it showed in the county final now in Donegal. St Eunan's Letterkenny beat Glenswell 9-6. You know, so it's not high-scoring games, but as Brian said, you know, Roslea can, you know, they can notch up high scores. So I think probably if they can win the midfield battle, because if they lose that, they have a tendency to bring Shamey out to the middle of the park, and I just feel if they bring Shamey out to the middle of the pitch, they lose that scoring threat up front. So if if they can win if James Sherry can win the midfield battle, I'd say probably you wouldn't write off Roslea. I'd probably give them maybe the edge if they can win that midfield battle. Just
it's great to hear, boys, you're both sticking for your own counties. That's pretty much all we have time for this weekend, folks. I'd like to say a massive thanks to Thomas and Brian coming out tonight and appearing on the show, and of course a massive thank you especially to Brian for letting us come here to the Hollywood Hotel here in Bundoran. It's the very best of luck to Roslea this weekend, who represent Fermanagh in the Senior Championship, and also a special mention to Derry Lynn O'Connell's, who had a fantastic victory last Sunday against St Paul's Lurgan, and who next weekend face Inniskeen of Monaghan. The very best of luck to both sides in their respective games. I've been Pauric McGurn. Take care and God bless.